He had everything a man of his age could desire: power, gold, and glory. Yet as the years passed, all the splendor of his reign could not hide the truth. England's most powerful king was a man consumed by fear, vanity, and a hunger that could never be satisfied. 6 wives, 2 executed, 2 divorced, 1 died in childbirth, and 1 outlived him, barely. Behind the grand portraits and royal titles lay a man who could not escape the shadow of his own obsession. Not lust, not love, but the need to be remembered. Henry VIII, the king who couldn't stop marrying. When Henry was young, England adored him. He was athletic, handsome, charismatic, a Renaissance prince in a medieval world. He wrote poetry, played music, and spoke of virtue. He was everything his father was not, warm where his father had been cold. And at just 17, he married Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess once betrothed to his late brother. Their marriage began in triumph, England and Spain united, God smiling upon the new Tudor line. But years passed. Catherine gave birth, again and again, to stillborns and infants who died in their cradles. Only one child survived, a daughter, Mary. For Henry, the failure to produce a son was not mere disappointment. It was a wound to his divine identity. Kings were chosen by God to preserve dynasties, and a man without an heir was a man cursed. As Catherine aged, Henry began to see her as an omen, proof that heaven had turned against him. He turned to Scripture, searching for divine explanation, and he found it. If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing. They shall be childless. The verse from Leviticus struck him like lightning. Perhaps he had angered God by marrying his brother's widow. Perhaps this was no accident, but punishment. Catherine refused to confess to any sin. She had been a virgin when she married Henry, she insisted, but Henry's mind was already shifting, from guilt to justification. What began as doubt became obsession. He sought annulment, not from love, but from fate. When he asked the Pope for an annulment of marriage, the answer was no. Rome was under the shadow of Emperor Charles V, Catherine's powerful nephew, and the Pope would not risk offending him. Trapped between politics and pride, Henry did the unthinkable. He broke with Rome. He made himself head of the Church of England, and thus began one of the greatest religious upheavals in Western history, born not of theology, but of a man's desperate need for a son. Catherine was cast aside, banished from court. She died alone, still calling herself the king's true wife. But in Henry's mind, she had become a ghost of failure, proof that destiny could defy even a king. Yet as one queen faded into exile, another presence was already taking shape in the glittering corridors of Whitehall. Her name was Anne Boleyn. She was everything Catherine was not: young, witty, magnetic. Anne Boleyn arrived at court like a spark among dry tinder. Henry had met her before, one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting. But this time, something in her manner changed him. She refused to be a mistress. She wanted a crown, or nothing. And Henry, ever accustomed to getting what he wanted, found himself consumed. Letters written by his own hand reveal a man unhinged by passion. I can no longer live without you. If you love me with half the affection I love you, my doubts will disappear. When Catherine was finally cast aside, Anne became queen. The court dazzled with feasts and jewels. Henry's dream seemed complete. But dreams can rot quickly when they're built on guilt. Anne gave birth, not to the son Henry demanded, but to a daughter, Elizabeth. The king masked his disappointment, but his eyes had already begun to wander. As Anne failed to conceive again, his affection curdled into suspicion. The courtiers whispered. Anne was too bold, too clever, too proud. Henry's pride could not endure a woman who spoke her mind in a world that worshipped obedience. When rumours of her flirtations began, Henry's paranoia ignited. In 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and treason. The evidence was absurd. The trial, a performance. Her execution, swift. Witnesses say she knelt with grace, whispering prayers for the husband who condemned her. As the sword fell, Henry feasted that same evening with another woman. The passion that had burned bright enough to burn an empire ended in silence. Her name cursed, her memory erased. But her daughter, Elizabeth, would one day rule the world Henry tried to control. The court had barely cleaned the blood from the scaffold when Henry announced his next engagement. Jane Seymour, a quiet lady from a noble family, was everything Anne was not: gentle, mild, obedient. A balm for the king's wounded pride. Jane promised stability and, more importantly, a son. For Henry, she represented redemption, a final chance to restore his divine purpose. In 1537, she gave him exactly that, a healthy male heir, Prince Edward. Henry wept, the kingdom rejoiced, he finally had what he had sacrificed his soul for. But joy can be cruelly short-lived. Just days after childbirth, Jane fell ill with infection. Within 2 weeks, she was dead. Henry was devastated, or so he said. He wore mourning black for months and never spoke ill of her name. But beneath that grief lay another truth. His obsession had claimed its purest victim. He had his son. And yet, peace never followed. The void that had driven him, the gnawing hunger for control, remained. Jane had given him everything he wanted, and her death proved he could never hold what he loved without destroying it. By the time Henry sought his fourth wife, he was no longer the Prince of Youth. The once athletic king now suffered from ulcers, obesity, and paranoia. His temper had grown monstrous. Few dared contradict him. When his advisors arranged a marriage with Anne of Cleves, a German noblewoman, Henry agreed, sight unseen. A diplomatic match to secure Protestant alliances. But when Anne arrived in England, Henry recoiled. "She is nothing so fair as she hath been reported," he spat. In modern words, he found her unattractive. The marriage lasted 6 months. Henry annulled it on grounds of non-consummation. Anne, perhaps the wisest of them all, accepted gracefully and lived in comfort as the king's beloved sister. She survived him, a rare distinction. Then came Catherine Howard, a girl barely 17, vivacious and naive. Henry was 50. He adored her youth, her laughter, the illusion of returning to his own vanished vigor. But Catherine's past and her flirtations at court caught up to her. When her indiscretions reached Henry's ears, the mask of tenderness shattered. Catherine was executed for adultery in 1542. Witnesses said she asked for the block before the axe fell, whispering, "I die a queen," but would rather have died the wife of Culpeper. It was not the words of betrayal that haunted Henry, but their truth. He could command nations, but never love. Every marriage brought him further from salvation. His sixth and final wife, Catherine Parr, was not a young beauty or a political pawn. She was a mature, intelligent widow, a scholar of theology who knew how to handle a wounded king. Henry needed comfort, not passion. She provided it, tempering his fury with gentleness and intellect. She even reconciled him with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, something no other wife had achieved. Catherine nearly fell victim to his paranoia when her Protestant sympathies drew the suspicion of his counsel. A warrant for her arrest was signed, yet before it could be carried out, she fell to her knees before Henry, confessing that her only aim was to distract him from his pain. He forgave her. She survived. When Henry died in 1547, Catherine Parr outlived him, becoming the only one to walk away with her head, her dignity, and her freedom intact. In the end, the king who defied God to secure his dynasty left behind only fragments. His longed-for son, Edward VI, died before reaching adulthood. His daughter Mary reigned briefly, haunted by zealotry. And the daughter he least desired, Elizabeth, became one of the greatest monarchs in history. Perhaps that is the final irony. The child born of his mistake was the one who would immortalize the Tudor name. Henry's 6 marriages were never about love. They were the echo of a man fighting the one enemy he could never conquer, time. He believed a son would make him eternal. Instead, he became eternal for the very thing he tried to escape, his failures. Even now, centuries later, his wives are remembered not as ornaments to his crown, but as chapters in the story of a man consumed by himself. In his portraits, he stares outward, broad, defiant, untouchable. But behind those painted eyes lies a truth that no throne can conceal. The king who could command the world could not master his own heart. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe.